The millionaire arrived home and heard his daughter pleading, "Please, I can't take it anymore." So he kicked the door in desperation. When he burst into the room, he found the girl curled up, with marks that words could never explain. The stepmother tried to hide it, but the fear in the daughter's eyes spoke louder than any excuse. In that moment, the most powerful man in the city realized he had failed where it mattered most. In the affluent neighborhood of Westlake Hills, Austin, where tech entrepreneurs built modern mansions behind tall gates and immaculate landscaping, 9-year-old Emma Sullivan lived in a beautiful prison of marble and glass. Every morning, she would wake before sunrise, hoping to catch a glimpse of her father, James Sullivan, CEO of Vertex Innovations, before he disappeared into his busy day. The polished floors echoed with her tiny footsteps as she made her way downstairs. The mansion was always eerily quiet at dawn, filled with cold stares and rehearsed smiles that never reached the eyes of her stepmother, Rebecca. "Dad?" Emma whispered, peering into her father's home office. James was already focused on his laptop, fingers dancing across the keyboard as multiple screens displayed charts and data. "Not now, sweetie. I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, he said without looking up. His voice was kind but distant, wrapped in the fog of a man who spent more time in virtual meetings than in his own living room. Emma nodded silently and backed away, clutching her worn teddy bear closer. As soon as James's Tesla pulled out of the driveway, Rebecca's demeanor transformed like a mask being removed. "There you are!" Rebecca snapped, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Emma's shoulder. "The kitchen needs cleaning. And don't forget those fingerprints on the glass. Doors to the patio." Rebecca had been a lifestyle influencer before marrying James, her Instagram still featuring perfect family moments and inspirational quotes about motherhood. What her followers didn't see was the woman behind the filtered photos. "But I have school today," Emma whispered, eyes downcast. Rebecca's brother, Tyler, lounged on the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. "School can wait," he smirked. "My sister needs this place spotless for her women's empowerment brunch." Tyler had moved in 3 months ago after another failed business venture, though his only visible work seemed to be managing Rebecca's social accounts and drinking. James's expensive bourbon. Mrs. Garcia, the elderly housekeeper who had been with the Sullivans since before Emma's mother died of illness, attempted to intervene. "The child needs to get to school, Mrs. Sullivan." Rebecca's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Mrs. Garcia. In fact, I've been meaning to tell you, your services are no longer required." Emma watched in horror as Mrs. Garcia was escorted out that very afternoon, her few belongings hastily packed into a cardboard box. But before leaving, the old woman managed to slip something into Emma's pocket during a quick embrace. Later, hidden, inside her closet with only her teddy bear as witness, Emma unfolded the note. "They will try to silence you. Never stop fighting." With trembling fingers, she tucked the note inside her teddy bear's small tear in the seam and pulled out a small notebook Mrs. Garcia had given her months ago, saying sometimes writing helps make sense of difficult feelings. Now it would become her silent testimony. That night, after scrubbing the kitchen floor until her hands were raw, Emma began her secret diary. She wrote about the tasks, the insults, the accidents Rebecca would create for her to clean. How Tyler would laugh when she struggled with chores too heavy for her small body. Days passed into weeks. Mrs. Garcia was gone, but mysterious packages would occasionally appear by the garden shed, snacks, small notes of encouragement, and eventually a tiny voice recorder disguised as a bracelet charm. The old housekeeper had not abandoned her. Emma became skilled at hiding things, the recorder beneath her mattress, the diary behind a loose baseboard, small cameras Mrs. Garcia had smuggled to her disguised as decorative pins. She documented everything, learning to capture the truth while keeping her expression neutral and her eyes lowered. "You're nothing like your mother," Rebecca would say when they were alone, voice dripping with contempt. "She was elegant and talented. You're just a burden." The words stung, but Emma wrote them down, each insult becoming another piece of evidence. She didn't know what she was building toward, only that Mrs. Garcia had told her to never stop fighting. So she fought the only way she could, by preserving the truth that Rebecca and Tyler tried so hard to erase. Meanwhile, James remained oblivious, trapped in his world of venture capital and product launches, coming home after Emma was asleep, and leaving before the bruises on her arms could raise questions. The few times he noticed something amiss, Rebecca had explanations ready. She fell during soccer practice, or children are so clumsy at this age. But as Emma's diary filled with painful truths, the day would soon come when even James Sullivan couldn't look away from what was happening right under his roof, in the shadows behind closed doors that held his daughter captive in plain sight. The accident happened on a Wednesday afternoon. Emma was carrying a tray of expensive china to the dining room when Tyler deliberately extended his foot into her path. The crash echoed through the mansion as porcelain shattered across the marble floor. Rebecca appeared within seconds, her face contorted with rage. "You clumsy, worthless child!" She grabbed Emma's wrist so hard it left finger-shaped bruises. "Do you have any idea how much that Wedgwood set cost?" "It was an accident," Emma whispered, though she knew it wasn't. Tyler stood in the doorway, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Everything is an accident with you," Rebecca hissed. She shoved Emma toward the mess. "Clean it up, every piece, and no dinner until it's spotless." Later, alone in the kitchen, Emma carefully picked porcelain fragments from her bleeding palm. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and her stomach cramped painfully. Through the window, she could see Rebecca and Tyler lounging by the infinity pool, champagne glasses in hand as they laughed at something on Tyler's phone. When darkness fell, bringing with it a violent Texas thunderstorm, Emma made a desperate decision. She packed her teddy bear, diary, and recorder in her school backpack and slipped out through the utility room door. The rain soaked her immediately, but she pressed on, following the long driveway to the main road. Lightning illuminated her path as she reached the neighborhood entrance, where she frantically waved at approaching headlights. A pickup truck finally slowed. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, rolled down his window. "Hey there, sweetie. You shouldn't be out in this storm all alone." "Please," Emma said, teeth chattering. "I need help." But before she could explain, another vehicle pulled up. Tyler's Range Rover. "Thank goodness you found her," he called out, his voice dripping with false concern. "My niece ran away after a fight with her dad. The whole family's been searching everywhere." The truck driver looked between them, uncertainty evident in his expression. "That true, little one?" Emma opened her mouth to protest, but Tyler was already gripping her shoulder, his fingers digging into her collarbone. "She's going through a tough time since her mom passed. Thanks for stopping, man. Really appreciate it." Back at the mansion, Rebecca was furious. "You ungrateful little brat," she seethed, dragging Emma upstairs. "After everything we do for you." The punishment was severe. Locked in her room for 3 days, meager meals pushed under the door, mostly untouched. But Rebecca had made a critical mistake. When James called from his business trip to Seattle that weekend, he asked to speak with Emma. "She's not feeling well," Rebecca lied smoothly. "Doctor says it's just a virus. She's sleeping now." But in the background, James heard something, a muffled cry, then what sounded like a slap. "What was that?" he asked sharply. "Just the TV," Rebecca said quickly. "I'll have her call you tomorrow when she's feeling better." James hung up, troubled by what he'd heard. For the first time in years, he cancelled his remaining meetings and booked an early flight home. Meanwhile, Emma had managed to retrieve her diary from its hiding place. She wrote frantically, documenting the latest events. Outside her door, she could hear Rebecca and Tyler arguing in hushed tones. "We need to move faster," Tyler urged. "He's getting suspicious." "Don't rush me," Rebecca snapped. "The documents aren't ready yet. Once they're signed, we can do whatever we want with the girl." Their voices moved away, but Emma had heard enough to understand the danger. Rebecca wasn't just cruel, she wanted something more. Something involving documents and signatures. The next day, while cleaning James's home office under Rebecca's watchful eye, Emma noticed something unusual. Financial papers requiring her father's signature. One signature already on the page looked wrong, somehow different from her father's normal writing on her school permission slips. When James returned unexpectedly that afternoon, Rebecca was caught off guard. She quickly composed herself, greeting him with a practiced smile. but not before he noticed the fading bruise on Emma's wrist as she carried his luggage upstairs. "What happened to your arm?" he asked quietly when Rebecca stepped away to prepare coffee. Emma froze, years of conditioning making her hesitate. "I fell," she whispered automatically. James knelt down, really looking at his daughter for the first time in months. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden movements, how thin she'd become. Something was very wrong in his beautiful home. That night he made a call to his old college roommate, Michael Reynolds, now a private investigator. "I need your help," he said, voice low as he stood on the balcony, watching Rebecca through the window. "Something's happening in my house, and I think I've been blind to it." Within days, tiny recording devices appeared throughout the mansion. Michael installed them during a charity event hosted by Rebecca, nearly being discovered when Tyler returned, unexpectedly to retrieve his forgotten phone. Emma noticed subtle changes in her father, how he watched Rebecca more carefully, how he came home earlier, asked more questions about her day. Hope, fragile as a butterfly's wing, began to flutter in her chest. What no one realized was that Mrs. Garcia had never truly left. From her modest apartment across town, the elderly woman had been gathering her own evidence, coordinating with other household staff Rebecca had fired, building a case file. She had seen too many children hurt by adults who should protect them. Not this time. Not Emma. The first real breakthrough came when James listened to recordings from the library. Rebecca's voice, cold and calculating. "Once these transfers clear, we'll have access to everything. The board will never trace it back to us." Tyler had laughed. "And what about the brat? She's becoming too observant." "We'll deal with her," Rebecca had replied. "She's seen too much." That night, James sat in his car in the driveway, unable to enter his own home, rage and guilt competing for dominance. How had he missed the signs? While he'd been building his tech empire, his daughter had been suffering under his own roof. He called Michael again. "I need to get Emma out, now." The recordings revealed a disturbing reality that James could no longer ignore. Rebecca and Tyler's late-night conversations, captured by Michael's devices, painted a sinister picture far beyond what he had imagined. "Once the transfers are complete, we'll have control of everything," Tyler had said one night. "The board will never know what hit them until it's too late." Rebecca's voice was cold and calculated. "What about Emma? She's becoming a problem." "We'll deal with her," Tyler replied. "She's seen too much." James listened to the recordings in his car parked blocks from his own home, hands shaking with rage and guilt. How could he have been so blind? While he'd been building his technology company, his daughter had been suffering under his own roof. Michael placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "We need more evidence before we move. Financial records, the forged signatures. We need to be thorough." James nodded grimly. "And we need to get Emma somewhere safe. Now." That evening, James suggested a father-daughter weekend trip. Rebecca protested. There were social events, business dinners, but James was insistent. "When was the last time I spent a weekend with my daughter?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge Rebecca had never heard before. "The company won't collapse if I take 2 days off." As they packed the car, James whispered to Emma, "Take your special bear, and anything else that's important to you." Confusion flickered across Emma's face, but something in her father's eyes made her nod. She retrieved her teddy bear and the backpack containing her diary and recordings. They drove north toward the Texas Hill Country, the tension gradually melting from James's shoulders, with each mile that separated them from Rebecca. In the passenger seat, Emma watched the scenery change from suburban sprawl to rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. "Where are we really going, Dad?" she finally asked. James glanced at her, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Somewhere safe. I have a friend with a ranch near Lake Buchanan. We can stay there while we figure things out." "Figure what out?" James pulled the car over at a scenic overlook. Turning to face his daughter, he took a deep breath. "Emma, I need to know the truth. What happens when I'm not home? What does Rebecca do to you?" The dam broke. Years of silent suffering poured out as Emma told him everything, The chores, the punishments, the cruel words, the physical abuse. She showed him her diary, the recordings, the bruises she'd become expert at hiding. James listened, horror and self-loathing growing with each revelation. When she finished, he pulled her into a gentle hug, his tears falling into her hair. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I failed you. But that ends today." They reached the ranch as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor Wilson, a silver-haired woman with weathered skin and kind eyes, welcomed them warmly. "Michael called ahead," she explained. "Your room is ready upstairs, little one. There's hot chocolate on the stove." While Emma explored the cozy ranch house, James and Eleanor spoke in hushed tones by the fireplace. A former family court judge, Eleanor had helped Michael with cases involving children before her retirement. "Rebecca has been systematically forging my signature on company documents," James explained. "They're trying to transfer my assets to offshore accounts, but that's not what matters now. What matters is keeping Emma safe." "And what's your plan?" Eleanor asked, her experienced eyes studying him carefully. "Michael is gathering evidence. Once we have enough, we go to the authorities. But Rebecca has connections, society friends, judges, influential people who only see her charitable public persona." Eleanor nodded grimly. "The masks people wear in public can be very convincing." That night, James received a call from Michael. "They know you've taken Emma. Rebecca's called the police claiming you've kidnapped your own daughter during a custody dispute. She's painting you as unstable, obsessed with work, prone to paranoid delusions." James's blood ran cold. "But there is no custody dispute. We're still married. She filed emergency papers this morning, claiming you're a danger to Emma. Tyler's been coaching her. They're moving faster than we anticipated." Outside the ranch window, James could see Emma sitting on the dock with Eleanor, feeding ducks on the small pond. For the first time in years, his daughter looked peaceful. He would not let Rebecca destroy that peace. "What do we do?" he asked. "We fight back," Michael replied grimly. "Mrs. Garcia has agreed to testify. She's been keeping records of her own, photographs, notes about Emma's injuries. And I've found something else. Rebecca has a history. Her first husband's daughter was removed from her care after a series of unexplained accidents." A plan began to form. They would need lawyers, evidence, witnesses. They would need to move carefully but quickly. Most importantly, they would need to prepare Emma for what was coming, a battle that would expose her private suffering to public scrutiny. As dusk settled over the ranch, James joined his daughter on the dock. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight, under the emerging stars, he would simply be her father. "Can we stay here forever?" Emma asked softly. James squeezed her small hand. "Not forever. But someday when this is all over, we'll find our own special place. I promise." The next morning, news. Outlets began running stories about tech CEO's mental breakdown, and custody battle turns to kidnapping. Social media exploded with carefully crafted narratives painting Rebecca as the concerned stepmother and James as the controlling, work-obsessed father who had snapped under pressure. "They're saying awful things about you, Dad," Emma said, having glimpsed a headline on Eleanor's tablet. "People often believe what's easiest to believe," James explained gently. "Rebecca is very good at making people see what she wants them to see." Their sanctuary was compromised when James discovered that the young woman he'd hired as Emma's tutor, recommended through a service Rebecca had suggested, had been reporting their whereabouts. He found her photographing Emma's diary pages while the child was outside with Eleanor. "Who are you really working for?" James demanded, confiscating her phone. The woman's defiant expression confirmed his suspicions before she even spoke. "Mrs. Sullivan is concerned about her stepdaughter. She has a right to know where her child is." "She's not her child," James said coldly, "and you're trespassing." Days at Eleanor's ranch fell into a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with pancakes shaped like animals, followed by horseback rides along the property's trails and collecting wildflowers. Afternoons were filled with board games, drawing sessions, and the slow rebuilding of trust between father and daughter. For the first time in years, Emma began to relax, her nervous habits gradually subsiding. But the nights remained difficult. She would wake screaming, convinced Rebecca was coming to take her away. James would sit with her until dawn, his heart breaking anew each time. "It takes time," Eleanor assured him. "The mind doesn't heal overnight." Meanwhile, Rebecca launched her offensive. News outlets continued running stories about the unstable tech CEO who had abducted his own daughter. Social media buzzed with carefully crafted narratives painting Rebecca as the concerned stepmother and James as the controlling, work-obsessed father who had snapped under pressure. "She's telling everyone you're crazy," Emma said one morning, having overheard Eleanor discussing the situation with Michael on the phone. "Sometimes people believe lies because the truth is harder to accept," James explained, choosing his words carefully. "Rebecca is very good at making people see what she wants them to see." After the tutor was escorted off the property, Emma became even more anxious. "They'll find us," she whispered that night, clutching her teddy bear. "They always find me." One evening, during a particularly severe thunderstorm that reminded Emma of her failed escape attempt, she disappeared from the ranch house. Panic ensued as James, Eleanor, and Michael searched the surrounding property, calling her name through the driving rain. Eleanor found her huddled beneath an old oak tree half a mile away, soaked and shivering. "I had to run," Emma explained through chattering teeth. "In my dream, Tyler was coming with bad men to take me away." As they carried her back to the ranch, James made a decision. They couldn't keep hiding. It was time to fight back. Mrs. Garcia arrived the next day with a team of lawyers. The elderly housekeeper wept when she saw Emma, gathering the child in a fierce hug. "We have enough," Michael announced, spreading documents across Eleanor's dining table after Emma had gone to bed. Financial fraud, evidence of physical abuse, witness testimonies from other household staff. Rebecca's orchestrating a media campaign against you, but we have the truth. The legal team explained their strategy. They would file for emergency custody, present evidence of abuse, and counter Rebecca's narrative with documentation of her systematic mistreatment of Emma. "There's something else," Mrs. Garcia said quietly. "Before I was fired, I found this in Rebecca's private desk." She produced a flash drive. It contains videos of Rebecca coaching Tyler on how to manipulate James. They've been planning this for over a year. The videos revealed Rebecca's true nature: cold, calculating, and utterly focused on accessing James's fortune. In one particularly damning clip, she laughed about how easy it was to manage James by keeping him busy with work emergencies she secretly orchestrated. "When will we need to appear in court?" James asked. 3 days, the lead attorney replied, "and Emma will need to testify." The color drained from James's face. "She's just a child. A child who's been keeping meticulous records," Mrs. Garcia pointed out gently. "Her diary and recordings may be our strongest evidence." That night, James explained to Emma what was coming. "We have to tell the truth to a judge," he said. "About Rebecca, about what happened in our house. It won't be easy, but I'll be with you every step of the way." Emma twisted her hands in her lap. "Will Rebecca be there?" "Yes," James admitted, "but she can't hurt you anymore." The night before the hearing, Rebecca made her move. Tyler was spotted near the ranch, apparently scouting the location. Later, an unmarked package arrived containing photographs of Emma playing near the pond with a note: "Accidents happen to little girls who tell lies." The implied threat solidified James's resolve. He contacted the local sheriff, who provided a deputy to watch the ranch overnight. No one slept much. James spent the hours reviewing evidence with the legal team while keeping one eye on Emma's bedroom door. In the morning, as they prepared to leave for court, Emma approached her father with her teddy bear, diary, and the small recorder. "I'm ready," she said, her voice small but determined. James knelt to her level. "You are the bravest person I know, Emma Sullivan. Whatever happens today, remember that." As their car pulled away from the ranch, followed by Michael's SUV containing Mrs. Garcia and the legal team, Emma looked back at the peaceful pond shimmering in the morning sun. "Will we come back here someday?" she asked. "If you want to," James replied. "But first, we have to make sure you're safe. Forever." The courthouse in Austin loomed ahead, media vans already gathering outside. Camera flashes popped as James escorted Emma inside, a blanket draped over her head to shield her from prying eyes. Inside, Rebecca waited with her high-powered legal team, looking every bit the concerned and wronged stepmother in a conservative beige suit. "Remember, she can't hurt you here," James whispered to Emma as they took their seats. The preliminary hearing was tense. Rebecca's attorney painted James as a workaholic who had neglected his family, then kidnapped his daughter during a mental breakdown. James's team countered with evidence of the financial fraud scheme Rebecca and Tyler had been orchestrating. The judge, a stern-faced woman with shrewd eyes, studied the affidavits and preliminary evidence. "This is a complex case with serious allegations on both sides," she said finally. "I'm ordering a full hearing with testimony from all parties, including the minor child." Outside the courtroom, Rebecca approached them, her public mask firmly in place. "James, darling, this has gone far enough. Let's not put Emma through this ordeal. Come home, and we can work this out privately." James stepped between Rebecca and Emma. "There's nothing to work out. Stay away from my daughter." Rebecca's eyes hardened momentarily before she composed herself, aware of nearby reporters. "You're not well, James. Please let me help." "You!" As they left the courthouse, Emma clung to her father's hand. "She's pretending," she whispered. "She's always pretending." "I know," James said. "But now we have proof, and in 3 days, everyone else will know too." Back at the ranch, Emma had nightmares again. James found her sitting on the porch swing at dawn, clutching her teddy bear. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked, her voice small in the morning air. "What if she makes everyone think I'm lying?" James sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her thin shoulders. "The truth has power, Emma. And you have been brave enough to hold on to it all this time. Now we just need to share it." As the sun rose over the Texas hills, father and daughter sat together in silence, preparing themselves for the battle ahead. The hearing was set for Friday morning, and everything would depend on a 9-year-old girl finding the courage to speak her truth in a room full of strangers. The courtroom fell silent as Emma took the stand, her small frame nearly disappearing behind the wooden witness box. Rebecca sat at the defendant's table, the picture of wounded dignity in a conservative navy suit, occasionally dabbing at invisible tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Emma," the judge said gently, "can you tell us what life was like at home with your stepmother?" Emma's eyes found her father's. He nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word. She described the chores, the punishments, the hunger, the fear. She explained her diary, the recordings, the notes from Mrs. Garcia. Rebecca's attorney, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes, approached for cross-examination. "Isn't it true that children often exaggerate when they're upset, that sometimes they make up stories when they don't get their way?" "Objection," James's lawyer called out, badgering the witness. "Sustained," the judge ruled, frowning at Rebecca's attorney. But the damage was done. Doubt flickered across the faces of some jurors. Rebecca leaned forward, catching Emma's eye, and whispered something only the child could hear. "If you tell these lies, your father will go to prison." Emma froze, her words faltering. The courtroom seemed to spin around her. Then, through the haze of fear, she remembered something. Her father's hands gently bandaging her cuts after she'd broken the china, his voice reading bedtime stories at the ranch, the way he'd taught her to ride a gentle mare named Buttercup. Her voice returned stronger than before. "I'm not lying. I wrote everything down because Mrs. Garcia told me to never stop fighting." The decisive moment came when Michael presented the financial evidence. Rebecca had been systematically forging James's signature on company documents, transferring small but significant portions of his assets to offshore accounts controlled by Tyler. Rebecca's facade cracked. "James was never there," she hissed, composure finally slipping. "He cared more about his precious company than his own family. Everything I did, I deserved." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, as Rebecca's attorney desperately tried to control her client. During a recess, Rebecca's attorney approached James with a settlement offer. "My client is willing to drop all claims in exchange for a reasonable financial package." "There will be no deals," James replied coldly. Your client abused my daughter. There's no settlement that can fix that. The attorney's expression hardened. Then, perhaps the court would be interested in certain videos I have of your own parenting techniques. No one is perfect, Mr. Sullivan. Michael stepped forward. Are you threatening a witness with blackmail during court proceedings? Because that sounds a lot like witness tampering and extortion. The attorney blanched, backing away quickly. Later that day, she was removed from the case after the judge was informed of the incident. When the verdict came, it was decisive. Rebecca was found guilty of child endangerment, financial fraud, and perjury. Tyler, who had attempted to flee the state, was apprehended at the airport with documents detailing the entire scheme. Leaving the courthouse, James shielded Emma from the cameras and reporters shouting questions. "It's over," he whispered to her. "She can never hurt you again." 6 months later, the Sullivan. Lake Haven welcomed its first residents, 5 children who, like Emma, had survived homes where they weren't safe. The sprawling property around Eleanor's ranch had been transformed with additional cabins, a community center, and expansive gardens. James had stepped back from day-to-day operations at his company, choosing instead to focus on the foundation he'd established to support children recovering from trauma. Mrs. Garcia served as the Haven's house manager, her warm presence a constant comfort to the children. Emma, now 10, had become the unofficial welcoming committee for new arrivals. She showed them the best spots for fishing, the hidden fort. In the oak grove, the library filled with books where nightmares couldn't follow. One afternoon, as James worked in the vegetable garden they'd planted together, Emma approached with an envelope. "This came for me," she said quietly. Inside was a letter from Rebecca, written from the facility where she was serving her sentence. It contained a lengthy apology, explanations of her own troubled childhood, promises to make amends. Emma read it silently, then walked to the lavender patch they'd planted near the lake. She dug a small hole, placed the letter inside, and covered it with earth. "I don't want to keep carrying her with me," she explained when James asked. "I don't hate her anymore, but I don't need her words either." James nodded, understanding. That's what healing looks like. That evening, the Haven community gathered for their weekly bonfire. Children who rarely smiled now laughed as they roasted marshmallows. Parents learning to rebuild trust with their children shared stories and support. Eleanor, now the Haven's resident grandmother figure, led them in songs while Mrs. Garcia distributed homemade cookies. As twilight settled over the ranch, Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. "Are we going to be okay now?" she asked. James looked around at their created family, not perfect, still healing, but together and safe. "Yes," he said with certainty, "we already are." In the distance, a new family drove up the winding road to the Haven, their car headlights cutting through the gathering darkness like hope finding its way home.